Once upon a time, there lived a young, beautiful girl named Medusa, who, as a priestess of Athena, was forced to take a vow of celibacy. She carried out her life devoid of the carnal pleasures of sex, until one day, outside Athena's temple, she heard a noise. It was a low, rumbling noise, like nothing else she had heard before. It came closer, and soon she saw him, Poseidon, riding up to her on his water motorcycle. It didn't take long after removing his sunglasses for Medusa to feel a wave of Poseidon's cool wetness rush over her, if you catch my drift. Gross. So, Medusa invited him up into the temple, and they made love for what felt like hours, until Athena caught them wet-handed. Gross. Poseidon quickly gathered his clothes and rode off on his motorcycle. But Athena, angry as ever, put a terrible curse on Medusa for breaking her vows. Her beautiful skin was turned into a sickly pale green, her eyes bloodshot and cursed to turn anyone who looked into them into stone, and her beautiful golden locks turned to snakes. Even her pubes, but that was an easy fix with the twice-monthly Brazilian wax. Medusa was in shambles, and she spent the next month in her apartment alone, crying and breaking all the mirrors. Until finally, her girlfriends convinced her that it probably wasn't that bad, and she should join them for brunch the next morning. So Medusa showed up to brunch with makeup to mask her green skin, a nice big sun hat to cover her snakes, and sunglasses to cover her eyes. The girls had a wonderful brunch, and everyone complimented Medusa on how beautiful she looked, and told her she should go out and meet a man. They even made her a Tinder account. So Medusa arrived home later that day, still drunk off of all the mimosas, and began to swipe. Desperately missing the warm embrace provided to her by Poseidon, she practically swiped right on everyone. And because her pictures were from earlier that day, she was getting matches left and right. But there was one match that stood out, a man named Perseus. He was the whole shebang. Tall, dark, handsome, seemingly chiseled from stone, and vaguely mythical. Afraid of having to take off her sunglasses in front of him, she suggested a picnic in the park as their first date. She showed up in a similar outfit as brunch, sunglasses, a large hat, heavily made up. She sat down, Perseus poured her a glass of wine, and they proceeded to have a wonderful time, until the sun went down. Medusa decided that she must go, so as to not turn this man into stone. Perseus pleaded, and she finally agreed to let him give her a ride home. Medusa, swooning and white girl drunk off of cheap rosé, didn't think about the potential consequences of riding a horse, and agreed. Seconds into the ride, her hat flew off her head, exposing her snakes underneath. Perseus soon felt the slimy snakes touching the back of his neck, and pulled over to the side of the road, turning on his emergency flashers. He leaped off his horse and accused her of being a catfish, a monster. She cried and wiped up the tears from her eyes, revealing her green skin underneath her makeup. Perseus, enraged at being catfished by a sim, a secret internet monster, unsheathed his sword and cut off her head. It seems like an overreaction now, but you gotta remember, this was like a bajillion years ago. Things were different back then. So Perseus bagged up the head and took it to go show his buddies how he got screwed over. But when they saw the head, they all turned to stone. Perseus, bummed that all his friends are rocks, got an idea. He attached the head to his shield so that all his enemies would turn to stone. And that's the story of how Perseus got a badass shield. Come back next time, and you'll hear the story of that one woman who sued McDonald's because her hot coffee was hot.
They came up with a long list of names, including the Chipotle Chicks, the Dilly Damsels, and the Mayonnaise Maidens. But ultimately, they decided that less is more, and they settled on the Spice Girls.